Welcome, everyone. This is Chris again with Digital Defender Podcast, which is being brought to you by Virtual Firearms Association. We have a special guest today. His name is Cameron DePoussey with Blind Squirrel Enterprises. Cameron, welcome. Glad you were able to join us, and let's go ahead and get it started. But
Glad to be here.
the first question that I actually have is that name, Blind Squirrel Enterprises. Please talk to us about that. How did you come up with that name for the company?
So it's derived from the phrase, even a blind squirrel finds a nut eventually.
Mm,
And our company was actually started before we sort of found our stride. Our idea was to form a company that we could use to patent some of our cooler ideas and potentially license them. And you can sort of see the association there, throwing things at the wall to see what sticks didn't have quite as much of a ring to it as blind squirrel.
exactly.
So that's that's what that comes from, and it certainly seems like we've finally found our nut.
All right, that works. That works. Hey, love the name. Love the name. So let's talk about your company. What is it that you do with Blind Squirrel Enterprises?
So I'm the marketing director of Blind Squirrel Enterprises, and we're a three-man team right now. We're definitely a skeleton crew, but our goal is to, at this point, move into the firearms accessories market and sort of feed innovation and interesting technology into the market, things that haven't been seen before, things that haven't been done before, and things that are being executed in an interesting or unique way. We like to think outside the box, as it were.
Awesome, awesome. Can you elaborate a little bit as far as thinking outside the box? What are some of the things that you can see yourself or see your company actually doing differently than any other company that's out there?
So right now, our flagship product is actually an adapter for 1911 magazines to go into an AR-15,
Okay.
which is something that's been tried and given up on by other companies because they were thinking in a very conventional way. Most of the magazine adapters you see out there on the market are something that lives in the mag well, has its own dedicated mag release, and to do that with a 1911 magazine turns into a clockwork nightmare. Uh, your tolerances are very limited. The angle at which the magazine sits in the mag well doesn't leave you a lot of room to play with. And ultimately, you end up with something that's very complex and very fragile. And us coming from states that have magazine bans in place, we were interested in shooting PCCs. We owned AR lowers that were pre-ban, and so we were stuck with a mil spec lower.
Gotcha.
We were limited to 10 rounds anyway. So what we came up with was this little unit here that you can pop your 1911 mags into. I can actually demonstrate. I have everything on hand. I came prepared.
Absolutely.
And the whole unit goes into the gun. It's a simple two-piece clamshell
Wow.
assembly that just mimics the exterior dimensions of a Stanag magazine. And it's much simpler, it's much cheaper, and it works. You can use your stock controls on the rifle instead of a dedicated mag release, so the muscle memory is still in place for training purposes.
Mhm.
It's drop safe, which is not the case with anything that lives in the mag well, where again muscle memory takes over. You hit that stock mag release and you drop your $300 adapter on the ground.
Oh, exactly.
Versus ours is made of nylon 6.6. You could drop this thing out of an airplane and it'll come out unscathed, and it costs like $30 instead.
Sweet.
So
Sweet, sweet.
that's that's where we're going with the outside the box thinking, is trying to take something that's thought of conventionally and turning it into, well, what if we came at this from a completely different angle?
Wow. Wow. That definitely looks sweet. It does. I like that. Definitely might have to pick up one of those from you at some point. But we'll talk about that later though.
Certainly.
So, so is there any other products that you're actually pushing with Blind Squirrel?
So at the moment, we're working on accessories for this. We've got a speed loader that's a simple little 3D printed part We wanted to do that as economically as possible for the end user because a speed loader isn't a high wear item. So who wants to shell out for something like that? And that just lets you use it with the adapter in place. It's just specially sized to fit our adapter. We've got spare parts kits and stuff like that. And we do have some other stuff coming down the pipeline, some potentially patentable ideas. So I don't particularly want to discuss those in
Okay,
an open
I
forum,
understand.
but we have other stuff we're working on that's basically addressing the same simple problems, but coming from new directions.
Gotcha, gotcha. Oh, I'm definitely curious. So, like I said, we will talk about that. So let me ask you a question though, Cameron. What got you just into firearms in general? What's a little bit of your background?
So this is going to be like the uh the simplest, most all-American story, but it was actually Boy Scouts. Uh,
Okay,
first
okay.
first time I ever fired a rifle was at Boy Scout camp, shooting 22s on the rifle range, and let me tell you, I sucked, and that frustrated me to no end. I could not get that merit badge. I couldn't figure it out, and I was just bound and determined to get better at it because I wanted to improve my skill set. And from there, I just kept going. I've always been into target sports in one way or another. I've been doing archery since I was in single digits. I love my bows. I love being able to hit a target reliably. And from there, I mean, when I turned 18, I bought my first rifle for myself and sort of never looked back. I've always been looking for the next thing. I'm mechanically fascinated by firearms just from a sort of hobbyist engineering kind of perspective.
Mhm.
And also just the shooting itself, improving my skills, getting better, finding the equipment that suits me best. I mean, my very first rifle was a Lee Enfield #5 jungle carbine, which is absolutely savage to shoot, really rough, really terrible, and that was a lesson learned right off the bat.
Yeah,
And I
yeah.
just sort of continued to progress to find things that basically helped suit me, helped suit what I was interested in as far as shooting sports. And yeah,
So I want to piggyback over something that you said. So you said that you were in Boy Scouts,
yep.
and just youth when it just comes to firearms in general. That's an interesting topic right there within itself. Would you would you recommend or encourage that people actually start learning about firearms at an earlier age versus the versus being an adult? Do you think that actually a two-part question, or do you feel that it kind of eliminates just the fear of firearms that some people may have? What are your thoughts with that?
I do definitely think that it's important to get some form of firearms education from a young age. Not even necessarily as far as shooting or, forcing someone to even fire the guns from a young age, but understanding them, understanding that they're a tool, understanding that they are inherently dangerous are just important things. I mean, if you think about it like a tool, think about it like a chainsaw. I mean, even if you're not going to let your kid use the chainsaw, even if you're not going to use the chainsaw yourself, don't touch that is an important lesson. And just establishing that sort of baseline education around firearms is, I think, a vital part of firearms culture, let alone just general firearm safety.
Exactly.
And yeah, I think the earlier you can at least get that sort of inkling of information in kids' heads, the better things are going to turn out in the long run. And I mean, I certainly appreciate people learning or getting into the sport as adults, but you're all also going to have preconceived notions by that point. And you can sort of take that however you want it, whether it means somebody's scared of them or whether somebody has an idea established by watching John Woo films or something like that. Someone's going to already have the baseline established by the time they start trying to educate themselves. And that's not necessarily a good thing. I think it's better to have that baseline sort of instilled as to, at the very least, here's what they are, here's what they do, here's how they work, and here's how you should treat them.
I agree with you. I definitely agree with you. Just in that notion. The earlier, the better. If you had to put an age on it, I would probably say that I guess a reasonable age would be when you're able to make reasonable decisions and be as responsible as possible at the same exact time. So I couldn't necessarily say that, oh, everybody needs to start at 8 years old, because you might not naturally or be mature enough to actually be able to handle something that's that serious at that age. But then again, it might be. There's some people shooting at like 6, 7 years old having custom guns. We've all seen videos, at least I've seen videos on YouTube, some kids that's actually being able to shoot firearms. So I think it's a tool, just like everything else, that's important for you to be able to utilize it when you get older, you know? So I definitely agree with you in that notion. So
Yeah, that age
um,
of independence is hard to nail down, but I think you're absolutely spot on with that, where it's that age where a child is going to start making decisions on their own is the point at which it would be important to at least have that grasp on it, especially if they're going to be around firearms or things like that.
exactly. Yeah, you're absolutely right. Um, Plus, they're awesome. To pretty much sum it up, they're awesome. Great to use or whatever the situation. But it's also the way I look at it is that if a firearm's laying on the street, or if it's in the, say it's in the house, you see situations in which there's accidental shootings and things like that. Um, I will want my child, or any child that out there, that to actually know at the minimum of the just the four basic principles of the cardinal safety rules, just when it comes to firearms. Always
Yep.
treat guns as if they're loaded. Never point the gun at anything. You never want to shoot and destroy, and so forth. But just some of those basics. We're not. I mean, I'm not saying that you need to have a kid go out there and go be a sharpshooter, shooting down the range and everything like that. I mean, just the most important thing is just the safety, just when it comes to the firearms overall in general. So once you can actually master that, I mean, of course you can work on accuracy and things like that to make sure that you are as efficient as possible just when it comes to you operating the firearm. So just with that being said, we already know firearms is kind of a touchy subject for some people. Like, oh, guns are bad, or oh, they do this, they do that. But at the same exact time, they can actually save lives. So so I'm gonna go ahead and throw one of these sensitive subject issues that's out here. Do you think that we have a gun problem, or a mental health problem, or a mixture of both? What are your thoughts on that subject or that topic?
So I'm certainly going to say it's a mixture of both, with
Okay.
an asterisk and a lot of footnotes. Um, I think it's not so much, I mean, a gun is an inanimate object, it's a tool, and there are dangerous tools. A gun is a dangerous tool. And like any dangerous tool, it's entirely useful. It can be life saving in the right hands, or it can be lethal in the wrong hands. We know this. I'm not saying anything that we haven't heard before.
You're absolutely right. Just when it comes to just I guess on a political standpoint, you have like one side that's pretty much saying ban all guns, they're bad, weapons of mass destruction, and da 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 da. Then there's another side that's saying that, hey, your Second Amendment rights, and hey, it's written in the law for a reason. You know what I mean?
Right.
You have a right to actually defend yourself. So
And so I would certainly say that we have a mental health problem. Um, I don't think that's arguable from any standpoint, let alone whether we're coming from the gun perspective or even just a medical perspective. It's extremely difficult to get people to get the help they need, or when they do try to actually receive the help they need. I mean, this is not a new problem. If we look as far back as like Charles Whitman, I
Yes.
mean, the man was begging for help. He knew that something was wrong. He knew he was going to kill people and had told people as much. And the first time anyone paid him any attention was that first shot that rang out from the University of Texas bell tower.
Hmm.
And that continues to this day. So I think there is a mental health crisis in this country. And the fact that that's not being addressed hampers the ability to successfully make sure that people in those situations aren't having access to these dangerous tools. And on the flip side of that, coming from the gun perspective, I think, and this is me being a little bit biased coming from the marketing standpoint, I think there's an issue with the way that the media, for lack of a better word, markets the idea of firearms. I mean, it's if you paint something as villainous,
Hmm.
people that want to identify as villainous will jump on that bandwagon. It's the same issue as making, media celebrities out of mass shooters.
Exactly.
I mean, look at post Columbine. They had that whole thing that was ultimately kind of BS with like the trench coat mafia thing. And
Hmm.
then every edgy kid at that point in time went out and bought a black trench coat because they
Right.
wanted to be,
I remember.
yeah. And it's like, it's that same thing. They're being marketed as villainous and not just a tool or an item that happens to be used in this situation, tragic though it may be, but they're selling this idea that this is the thing you want if this is who you want to be. And I
Exactly.
think that's the larger problem combined with that mental health situation, and that kind of lands us where we are now.
One of the things that I noticed just when it comes to just piggybacking off of what you just said, that I've noticed that a lot of the shootings, and we're not trying to, lessen that it's not a serious thing, and it's definitely a bad thing. Let's
For
put that
sure.
out there first. One of the things that I've noticed that a lot of them have some type of issues or something else that's going on as far as just in their background, whether it was being bullied, whether it's just identity or trying to just find some kind of self purpose just when it comes to existence overall in general in the world. So
I
I
mean,
think um I think if just as parents or as adults that it's important that you just pay attention to a lot of warning signs as far as just what's going on with your child. All right. Nowadays, probably one of the biggest problems is screens and tablets and cell phones. Everybody has their face in those, and I think that a lot of just parents or overall in general are using those as a form of babysitters. Here,
yeah,
take this, go sit in the corner, leave me alone. Let me go cook dinner. Let me finish reading a book or whatever the situation is. And we need to just pay attention to just our child and just check for any kind of warning signs that you see that could potentially just be a problem.
yeah,
Yeah.
being there for someone,
Hmm.
acknowledging to yourself that there may be a problem here, whether you're the person who feels that you're having the problem or whether you're seeing it in someone else.
Hmm.
Ignoring that is never going to be the solution. I'm not saying that every person who's having some sort of mental health issue is going to become dangerous, but they're not going to get the help they need unless you address it. They're not
Exactly.
going to live a happy life unless someone helps them if they're incapable of helping themselves.
Exactly. So, with that being said, should the parents be held liable if their child turns around and ends up shooting somebody or school or something of that? What's your take on that? Who's
I think
accountable other than, yeah, who's accountable other than just the child? Do you think that the parents should possibly be held responsible as well?
I think that would definitely go on a very case by case basis. I mean, there was that recent case where the parents were held liable.
Yes.
The name escapes me at the moment,
Yes.
but
I forgot her name. I can get
yeah,
that information later, but yeah. I know the
um,
mom was, I believe the mom was tried or convicted first.
right,
I think it was a situation for those of you who may not know. Wish I had information right here in front of me so I can explain that to you better. But it was a situation in which the kid was reaching out for help. He was explaining, telling his mom, telling his parents that he's having all kinds of bad thoughts, to actually hurt people and things like that. And he was actually screaming for help over and over and over again. And he had access to firearms, and I believe his mom gave it to him or something like that, something of something of that nature, in which they, he went to the range to go shoot and everything like that. But he, at the same exact time, he's still asking for help, and he can't get these thoughts out of his head. Now,
yeah,
that's that situation right there where it's documented that this kid was screaming for help, kind of deal. I think that would be one of those special occasions in which you might want to hold the parents accountable for this particular
absolutely.
situation. But he ended up, I believe, was it like 6 or 7 high school students, I believe, they ended up killing, which is an unfortunate situation because he definitely realized that he had a problem within himself and he was looking to try to get help. But
Yeah, I
it's unfortunate. It's
certainly do believe there's a level of gross negligence
mm-hmm.
that somebody can practice where it's that out in the open, and I mean, in that case, they actively like countervened the fact that
Mm-hmm.
he was explaining that he was dangerous
Yeah,
and gave him the gun. And it's like that is a very special case in which I think there is certainly a liability on the part of the parents.
exactly.
And
Exactly.
again, I think it would have to be case by case as far as that's concerned, because there's certainly going to be situations where, and have been situations where warning signs were, I don't want to say ignored, but overlooked.
Yes.
And that enters a questionable area where it's like, I may be able to say personally that I blame the parent, but I wasn't there. And it's a very sort of wishy washy situation where it would be hard to hold somebody liable, at least just from a legal perspective.
I definitely agree with you. And of course, the media really isn't going to let out exactly what happened and what transpired. I know it's so much more to the story than was actually put out there to the public. So I definitely don't want to make any kind of rush judgment just when it just overall when it comes to that. But for those of y'all who haven't heard that story, just start paying attention to some of these warning signs because if that's the direction that we may end up going, which is making the parents accountable as well, pay attention to your kid. That's all I can pretty much say about that. Um, but while we're talking about just guns overall in general and just some of the fears that some people have, um, how do you feel about assault weapons, man, or basically the rifles? It's been talked, of course, about an assault weapons ban, and I'm like, they only belong in the military. And my thoughts on that topic before I let you respond to that is that gun is the primary purpose of that gun is not just to shoot people or for weapons of mass destruction or whatever it's being labeled as. I think it was called like a mass casualty weapon or something like that. Like that name sounds terrible if you hear about it. But that's not what it's intended for. They use for hunting, sports, competition shooting, just like your partner.
Yep.
It's numerous different things that it's actually used for. So, but what are your thoughts of just when it comes to the bad publicity that those guns actually receive?
I think it's a campaign that's largely being orchestrated and administered by people that don't have a background in firearms sufficient to say what potentially make something more or less dangerous,
Exactly.
if such a thing could even be said. And there's a lot of just the banning of what are ultimately aesthetic features that don't affect the firearm in any way functionally,
Exactly.
that it's all kind of it's a mess. I mean, what defines an assault weapon has changed so much. I mean, I even hate to use the term assault weapon
Exactly.
because I mean, between my AR-15 and my 30-06 bolt action, it would be a toss up to say, honestly, I think which of the two would be more dangerous? Is the one that's more accurate more dangerous, or is the one that has the potential to fire semi automatically with a higher capacity more dangerous? And I mean, there's too much to define there, and I think the people trying to define it are defining it based on, at best, a Hollywood understanding of guns. And it's deeply frustrating. I mean, I personally live in Connecticut. Our company's based out of Rhode Island. We both have assault weapon bans in place now, and you should see the Connecticut laws. It is a nightmare. Um, it is just overlapping strange use of terms by people that don't understand the subject matter, and just it's absolutely wild. There's things that contradict each other. There are things that now, like, this rule is superseded by this rule, but for this type of gun the old rule applies, kind of thing. It's a total mess. And I think if we could get everyone on the same page,
Yeah.
it would be one thing and have a reasonable discussion about it. But I think emotions and, like I say, that Hollywood understanding of guns just kind of have
Exactly.
cut such a deep groove through the center of the issue that it's really hard to bridge that gap and get people to actually talk about what may or may not be something you want to regulate.
Exactly. Another thing that's just wild to me is just when it comes to those weapons as well is the high capacity mags, the rounds that are more than 10 rounds.
Yep.
And I'm just like, okay, so if you have your standard 30 round magazine or whatever, right? You have that. Okay. All right. That's a high capacity mag. That's bad. Okay. So you give me a 10 round magazine, right? So I have three tens on me now. So my logic is, or my thinking of it is, how much time do you think I will need to let off 30 rounds versus me reloading two more additional times? What do you think the difference is? Let's just say if it's 1 second per shot, right? So
Yep.
30 seconds for my 30 rounds of my high capacity mag that gets fired off. But I got my three tens and I reload. What do? I add another second. So what? Now I'm at 33 or 34 seconds now. It still does the same exact thing.
Oh,
So
absolutely.
I just don't understand the point of you labeling something a high capacity mag versus a low capacity mag. Like that, it baffles me.
So, like, shooting in competition, I've done some like fun, it's like hobby level competition that I'm talking about here. I'm not a grandmaster at speed shooting or anything, but one of the things you figure out is, like, your transition times between targets can be longer than it takes you to do a reload.
Mhm.
And you may do an administrative reload between targets
Yes,
because you've got spare time and you lose no seconds to do so. So you're absolutely right. Having three 10 rounders versus having a 30 rounder doesn't make an appreciable functional difference.
you're
I
right.
mean, one of the products that we're hoping to bring to market for our adapters is a coupler. We actually
Oh yeah,
we made one prototype example and we're looking for manufacturer to make it. So if there's any manufacturers out there who are interested, please hit us up.
yeah, definitely. Hey,
But
come up.
yeah, it was just be a simple clamp that goes on
Hmm.
Body of the 1911 magazine, couples it to a second one, and now you have 20 rounds on the gun, and it's still 10 round magazines.
You're right. I think that would actually be awesome because now that you said that, if you add a coupler to it, and using the system that you just showed us, it'll still be lighter than you using a coupler and adding 230s or even two regular tens of the of 223 or 556 or whatever rounds that you're actually using. So that's a good
Yeah.
idea.
I mean,
I
a
think
lot
that's
of our a lot of our thought process comes from this sort of band state mentality of like what what can we get away with,
Mhm.
for lack of a better term. It's like, what are we allowed to do? What are the workarounds to make this still something that's fun to shoot? And something we worked out the other day was that we were looking at like which states had magazine bans.
Mhm.
Uh, this is coming from our market research and stuff like that. And then we started thinking about, I mean, we looked at this and it's like New York, California, these are some of the most populous states in the
Exactly.
country. And it's like working it out, 36% of the population lives in a place with a mag ban.
Hmm.
So these are all kind of workarounds and considerations that these people have to make if they're shooters. I mean, and they are all things that are easily worked around. Like you say, just carrying more magazines, having a coupler on the gun,
Exactly.
training. I mean,
So, question. So, do you feel that another sensitive subject? How do you feel, or better yet, how I can word it better is, should the states have regulation over the gun laws versus the federal government, ATF, and him, or not? How do you feel about that? Because keep in mind that a lot of the states, their laws are super erratic, just like some of the states that you've already named. You
oh
know,
yeah,
like if you're traveling and you're a concealed carry permit holder, and you're traveling and so forth. Some states is like, okay, you can't have more than 10 rounds. Then it's like, okay, well, no, you can't have more than a 10 round mag. It doesn't matter if you only have 10 rounds. You can't have more than a 10 round mag, So versus the ATF coming down and coming up with a whole uh the pistol brace ban. And now all of a sudden this is illegal. Now you got to register all your firearms. So I don't know. To be honest with you, as far as just where I stand, just with that. But what are your thoughts just when it comes to that versus the state versus the federal government?
I think my high in the sky fantasy ideal would be that there's some sort of base level foundation of laws on a federal level
Hmm.
that everyone knows to follow and make life easy traveling state to state, as far as even just how to travel with a gun
Hmm.
changes state to state. I mean, you drive through New Jersey, and that's a whole different set of rules, say, than driving through Massachusetts. It's like, where the ammunition has to be. Does it have to be separate from the gun and the gun has to be locked, or does it have to be in a different compartment? And like, you end up with all that weird stuff. So if you just had like foundational rules that made it easy to at least move through the country with your guns and not be a felon just because you crossed a state line with your gun stored in a reasonable way per the previous state,
Exactly.
I think that would be nice. And then, and as much as I don't like any firearms regulations in general of this type, then you can say the states are free to add on top of this. But here's a concrete base layer. But yeah,
Exactly.
it's tough to say. I mean, different states are always going to have different needs,
Hmm.
just as far as laws in general are concerned. But I think just having some sort of base layer. I mean, even like ages for acquisition
Exactly.
changing state to state and stuff like that is just it seems kind of ridiculous to me that it's that inconsistent. To say nothing about the content of the laws themselves, it's just wild that it's that varied, and that's something that we've run into as a company that deals in firearms accessories is just like having to navigate 50 states worth of laws as far as like where can we sell these, what can we deal with right now. As far as we know, we can't sell anything in Illinois and Washington because they have their extremely vaguely worded laws on the books about parts or
Mhm.
like feeding mechanisms. And we're looking at this and saying, I honestly could not tell you whether what we're selling constitutes a part per their definition in their laws.
Exactly.
And you run into all kinds of bizarre frustrations like that. And it shouldn't be the case. There should be some level of consistency there, at least as far as liability is concerned, because that's what's scary to us trying to run a small startup like this is a lot of these states are trying to hold manufacturers and sellers liable
Exactly.
versus, I mean, my opinion on the matter personally would be that if you live in a state where something's illegal and you buy it and have it shipped to you, that's on you.
Exactly.
I mean, that act itself is you violating the law
Hmm.
because we selling the product are doing everything right.
Exactly.
But yeah, it's gotten off on a bit of a tangent here, but it's
Oh,
deeply frustrating.
oh, it
But
absolutely is. It absolutely is, and I understand. Believe me, I'm on the same page with you. Just when it comes to that, I've seen some of the ban lists. I think that's what you want to call it. The ban list of guns that you can't have in some of the certain states, and some of the rulings for the firearms, what it states is that the gun is just similar to this kind of like that's not a reason to ban it because it's similar to it. You know, it's just that's like the worst reasoning, but that is what most of the reasoning is with a lot of guns that are banned in certain states because
oh
it's
yeah.
like and similar to a particular kind of firearm. But no, all guns are different. You know?
Oh, it's absolutely wild how subjective some of this stuff is. And so I have an anecdote I can share about this having to do with Connecticut, where a friend of mine purchased a Maxim 9, the
Hmm.
Silencer Co. integrated suppressed pistol. He was he got the thing, he was doing his tax stamp, everything like that, and that gun was made to be compliant for states where you couldn't have a threaded muzzle like Connecticut.
Oh,
And his was going to be the first one in the state. He got him when they were brand new. He's very excited about it. The thing was sitting in ATF jail at the store.
oh yeah.
And at some point, someone in the store had a question about it, decided to ask someone in law enforcement about this. And ultimately, a completely subjective call was made that no, this is illegal. It doesn't meet our criteria. And the reasoning for it was on that gun, the barrel is fixed into a trunnion with a nut. It inserts from the rear, and there are threads that
Mm.
allow that nut to screw down to hold the barrel to the gun. The rest of it is completely unthreaded. They said that those threads constituted a threaded muzzle capable of accepting a muzzle device.
Mm.
And his options were coming down to like, well, can I find a gunsmith to pin and weld this now? Or, and it just turned into a nightmare, and there's nothing you could do to argue it because you
Mm.
ran into that vague language where none of what they said is actually defined anywhere else in the law. So they can just sort of point at it and say, yeah, that's what we mean. And you can't do anything about it. That's my rant on that subject.
No, because the crazy thing is about that is that it's they didn't even give him a solution to it. You
Right.
know, he asked, and I know they didn't have an answer for it because no one wants to make that decision. They don't want that to be on them, but they can tell you what you can't have, kind of deal. So it's just it's wild to me. That's how you know that just a lot of the rules and laws, just when it comes to just let's just say firearms in general, there are people who aren't firearm people. They're people who don't really know firearms as far as just how they operate and things of that nature. So they make it like if little Susie or whatever is a victim of some kind of act of violence just when it comes to firearm, it's like, you know what, all guns are bad, give it a ball. It's always a blanket punishment, you know, whether or not you have at least 100 law-abiding citizens that's out there that, hey, I just use this for target practice to the range. Hey, I like to go hunting. Hey, I do competition shooting, whatever the situation is. This is what it is that I do, just, you know, for me. I mean, some people they go to the gym, work out. Some people they ride bikes. This is a sport for some people.
Yeah.
This is some of the things that they like to do, and they enjoy this as a hobby, you know. And the whole blanket punishment, how you try to just mark and make everything seem like it's bad. Um, I'm not okay with that. I think that's just not right, especially for law-abiding citizens. I mean, granted, there are some knuckleheads that's out there and criminals out there, but for the most part, most people who are gun lovers and 2A advocates, they're law-abiding people. They do the right thing. They do what it is that they're supposed to do, you know? So
Yeah.
it's unfortunate. Um, but if there is something that I don't even know if there's even an answer to this question that I'm getting ready to ask you. If there was one thing that's out there that you can do or recommend to help just try to prevent gun violence in general, what would it be?
Ooh. I mean, I think this goes back to the beginning of our conversation where it's education.
Yeah.
And I'm not saying it needs to be taught as a subject in schools or anything like that necessarily, though I believe when I was in elementary school, we did have some brief thing about, if you find a gun, go find an adult kind of thing. And I think that's the kind of thing that we should see more of
Mm-hmm.
is just some sort of education, some sort of awareness in the country and sort of demystifying guns in a way that I think would help prevent that level of, like I said, the marketing it as a villainous item
Mm-hmm.
is going to appeal to people who want to use it for villainous things. So that's certainly a part of it. And I think there's just a lot to be said for, like I say, enforcing existing laws. I mean, again, this is something that
Yeah.
it's not new information,
Mm-hmm.
but what we have out there on the books, we have no idea if something works or not because
Exactly.
the law itself isn't being enforced, or say the background check system isn't functioning as intended.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like people will say, this works or this doesn't work. And I think there's certainly validity to both of those arguments, but there's absolutely no viable empirical data because it none of it's actually functioning as intended.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, that was something. So for the last round of second to last round of Connecticut assault weapons ban discussion, we actually sat in on the public hearings for that. And that was one of the things that one of our state representatives brought up when somebody else was talking about, well, we should be instituting, background checks for any kind of firearms purchase, accessories, ammunition, stuff like that. It should all be going through our background check system to make sure the person buying it isn't a violent felon. And one of the other representatives, I wish I could tell you his name right now because I wanted to stand and applaud this man. He says, well, that's a beautiful idea. This is great plan. Violent felons shouldn't be buying ammunition because what are they buying it for? Sure. Where is our infrastructure for this? What is
Exactly.
our plan to enforce this? Because right now it says we have, I think it was like 3 people working in the state background check offices. How will they possibly handle this flow? And
Mhm.
the answer is they can't. And they can't fund it or won't fund it because you have this sort of posturing taking place in the lawmaking where it's more important to put the law on the books to seem like you're doing something than it is to actually back it up with any sort of feasible infrastructure or enforcement. And I think that's a starting place. I'm not saying that necessarily enforcing some of these laws, especially some of the more wonky and out of left field ones, will necessarily have an effect. But I think it would be nice to be able to look at what's on the books and say what does or doesn't work. Because right now, the best we can do is throw our hands up and say maybe.
You're absolutely right. My thoughts and opinion just when it comes to that, you can have all kinds of laws out there in the world, um, but when there's a will, there's a way. Like if you
Oh,
want to
yeah.
harm somebody, even if there was to a point where all guns are outlawed and completely pushed out of the states, let's just say something crazy like that happens, right? You don't think somebody would find or people would find another device to use to if they want to do a heinous act?
Oh, yeah.
So it's always, and I also believe that it's never a foolproof way to try to completely eradicate a problem that some
Right.
people may feel that firearms are. But just some of the laws are just, I don't know. It seems like they're kind of all over the place, kind of deal. And it's just like, okay, this happened. Okay, we need to outlaw this. Okay, this happened. Okay, outlaw that. Okay, this happened. And it's just like it's taken away just
It's
I think
over
the whole
legislated.
yes, over legislating, right? Is take away just the overall purpose as far as just what it's here and what it's designed for. Granted,
Right.
gun violence is, it's terrible. Remember just back in the day, people used to go outside, hey, meet me outside and duke it out kind of deal. That used to be how things were back in the day, but it's times have changed. Times have definitely changed. So let me go ahead and ask you this last final question, Cameron. If you had a choice to make a difference, just with your company of Blind Squirrel Enterprises and everything like that, something that you can promote or push to us firearm enthusiasts to make things easier or beneficial just for us to use firearms just in general. If there's a product or something that you can push out there that'll that'll just make our lives a little bit easier just when it comes to firearms. What would it be?
Ooh, that's a fascinating
Because you
question.
have an awesome product already out there with that 1911 adapter, and you making that with a coupler and the lighter weight. Oh, I'd buy it off of you. I definitely would.
I mean, our aim is to continue making things in this same sort of mindset, making things that will cater to that 36% of the population that lives in states that are restrictive towards firearms to make their lives a little bit easier in general. And oh man, it's hard to come up with a one specific item kind of thing. But as things ramp up for us and hopefully we get some more profit coming in to play around with, we're hoping to be able to start innovating in unique ways. And I know for one, our lead designer, who's his name is Steve, he's a serious competition shooter. He's actually shooting a state championship today, which is why he's not here with me.
Absolutely. Oh, we'll
And
have a chance to get Steve. We'll get
oh yeah,
him.
and he has a lot of ideas from that competition field, just very simple, small things. I mean, one he was just discussing the other day was something as simple as having shims for your rear sight on old military rifles, like Mauser type rifles,
Mhm.
because people like shooting these vintage rifle competitions, but they've got battle sights on them. They move in 100-meter increments. And so you have to sort of Kentucky windage your elevation.
Mm-hmm.
But he says, well, what if we just had a shim set that we could sell people that's sized to that rear sight? And you say, all right, I'm shooting at 200 yards today, pop a shim in, and your elevation's dead on. Just
Exactly.
very simple, very affordable solutions to things that are frustrations is kind of a lot of what we're trying to deal with. We have been working as a sort of theoretical side project on a system for installing a brake where you're not allowed to have a threaded muzzle.
Mm-hmm.
Just trying to find solutions for things like that, where it's like, here's something I want, here's something I can't do, and here's why. How can we come at this from a new angle that makes this viable for people?
Gotcha. Gotcha.
And we want to continue making products that we believe in. I mean, I love this adapter. It's great. I had already built a PCC and I was using the Mean Arms Endo mags because I had a couple of pre-ban registered PMags to use.
Mm-hmm.
And I liked them. They were all right. But we started working on this adapter. We came up with prototypes. We came up with a production model. And now these are all I shoot. And it's not just me shilling for the company. It's like I genuinely enjoy these things. I love my 1911s and I can use the same magazines for them. I love being able to use my stock controls, which was true of the Endo mags. They are a very good product.
Mm-hmm.
But it's just, this was a nice, simple solution. I don't have to worry about anybody asking me like at the range, oh, is that mag legal kind of thing.
Exactly.
And yeah, I mean, these things are extremely legitimate. And one of the things I genuinely like them for is building something that's compact, sort of like these don't stick very far out of a mag well.
Okay.
And I really like the idea of a pistol caliber carbine in a sort of home defense role.
Exactly.
And something like, or even say, because we're allowed to do it again now, the braced pistol
Yes.
concept.
Yes. Yes.
I mean, we're looking to do a video to this effect to post on our Instagram as well, just to demonstrate this sort of thing. But try doing, say, like a bill drill or a 10-10-10 drill with a pistol, and then do it with a braced pistol or a pistol caliber carbine and see how much faster, how much easier, how much more reliability and accuracy you get out of having that 3 points of contact.
Exactly.
Even for somebody who's an inexperienced, an amateur shooter.
Gotcha.
I mean, just having that stability versus the pistol it's a game changer.
Absolutely.
And I'm not saying it's bringing more force to bear. I mean, you're still using the same magazine that you'd have in your pistol.
Exactly.
But it's taking those 6, 7, 8, 10 rounds and applying them more effectively without a whole lot of compromise dimensionally.
Gotcha.
You add a few inches to the gun.
Okay.
And as a result, you get something that's a lot less likely to go out a window or go through a wall or something like that if you're able to put your rounds on target.
Exactly. Okay. Well, there you have it, everyone. All right. Thank you, Cameron, coming
Very
down,
welcome. Thank you for
sitting
having
down
me.
and just having this conversation with us. It's been a pleasure having you. I will have Cameron, for everybody out there, I will have Cameron's contact information as far as his company, social media sites as well, posted on here. So you can go ahead and check him out and see what it is he's talking about. Go ahead and get that 1911 adapter piece, man, and make it happen. Um, any last words you want to go ahead and tell our guests?
Nothing profound. Just get out there, train, be safe, and have some fun on this 4th of July weekend.
Absolutely. All right. Thank you for your time and stay blessed. Talk to you soon.